Well, they've closed the doors. That means we're really in trouble. Ladies and gentlemen, I am so glad to see people. Thank you so much for being here. I'm Tim Hankewich, Music Director of Orchestra, Iowa. First things first, can you hear me? I've got a lavalier mic right here, and is the level okay? And, okay, terrific. Where to begin? Oh, by the way, so hands up, who is actually enrolled in the senior college Frank Sinatra course? Fabulous. We had our second one today. I say that because it warms my heart, because it's done all online, and we do it from our studios up in Cedar Rapids at the Orchestra Iowa offices. So I'm basically just staring at a computer screen and a camera. And I know technology is supposed to work, but I got to tell you, when you're getting nothing back, no feedback. And frankly, I am astonished that people are actually tuning in to watch. So thank you very much. I am out of practice as a speaker. It used to be like falling off a log. So bear with me, because it's going to take some practice again. And I know most of you from how many years we've been doing this. But forgive me, we're all wearing masks, and I can't recognize some of you. So if you want to wink at me in Morse code as to who you are, I don't read Morse code. So tell you what, why don't I share with you sort of an overview of the season, because knock on wood, it should be close to a fairly normal year. And then, prompted by your questions, I'd be happy to talk about last year and what happened, or more specifically, what didn't happen, and all the angst and the challenges that we had to endure to keep alive and to make sure that there was something for us to play this year. So, first thing on the entire series will be our annual concert on the lawn of Brucemore. We've been doing this since the flood of 2008. And I really wanted to create something that had a lot of pop to it, something that would basically make the statement that we're back. And it's quite an extravagant program. Oh, I forgot to mention this. I want to also shout out to Jerry and Nancy Rose. They're not here today, but today is their 60th wedding anniversary. I saw them in Colorado a couple weeks back, and I told them I'd try and embarrass them in front of here, because I told them that when you don't come to a concert or a lecture, we tend to talk about them behind their back. So anyway, great to see them in Colorado. So back to the topic at hand. When I began designing programs to begin our season on the lawn of Brucemore, it's really important to make sure that the music that we choose has crossover appeal. So it's not necessarily just for people who love symphonic music. In fact, it's more important for people who never come through our doors. And this is the one opportunity for them to bring their families. And so the whole idea of this program is that people are encouraged to bring a picnic and a good bottle of wine, or even a not so good bottle of wine, and enjoy their family and friends and their starlight with some great music that all can enjoy. And that's why this year I chose the music of Rodgers and Hammerstein. But it's more than just the orchestra playing medleys of hits. In fact, we have a really spectacular line of artists, including Ezekiel Andrew, Elena Shadow, Christopher Johnstone, who's actually a CR native from Jefferson High School. These three, until the pandemic shut down Broadway, are making their living performing in Broadway. And it's great to have professionals come and show us how it's done. But additionally, we also have some local talent that we're also going to be showcasing. Catherine Blades, for example. She got her start on Broadway. She's a local girl, and she was cast in, not The Pajama Game. What was the other one? Oh, it'll come to me. She was cast about 3 or 4 years ago and has come back to Cedar Rapids. Amy Friedel Stoner, who also has a following. Rosemary Gast is also a local artist, as is Zane Haddish and Michael Pinock. So you're going to have the whole orchestra, you're going to have these guest artists in front. There's also going to be some choreography and dancing, and to make matters even bigger, a choir because we'll be joined by the Cedar Rapids Concert Chorale. So, in short, lots of bodies on stage, complete with dancers and choreography and with selections from South Pacific, King and I, Carousel, Sound of Music in Oklahoma, just to name a few. So, if you can, we'd love to see you on the lawn of Brucemore on September 18th. But now for the formal season, as it were. And as you all know, that we perform most of our masterworks twice. One up in Cedar Rapids and one here in Coralville, usually at the Coralville Center for the Performing Arts. What you're going to see is with our season is a little bit of recycled programming from last season that did not happen, as well as some new programming that is more occasion specific. This first program was initially intended for last season, as it was Beethoven's 250th anniversary. And so with this, we were going to do two major works on it. The Fifth Piano Concerto, also known as the Emperor, and of course the four most famous notes ever written, the Fifth Symphony. I'm extremely excited that we have pianist Stuart Goodyear, who is a Beethoven specialist, and he'll be joining us for this. Which leads me to my next slide, which is Beer and Beethoven. So last year, I really wanted to make something special out of Beethoven's 250th anniversary, and in partnership with the university, we cooked up this idea of performing all 32 Beethoven piano sonatas. Well, obviously that didn't work, so we're going to do it this year. And so when we're going to be performing it twice. We're going to be performing at Opus Concert Cafe, of which there will be 32 different beers for 32 different piano sonatas, because I firmly believe our motto that the more you drink, the better we sound. The other performance will be in Voxman. Now, sadly, the university does not have liquor license, so you're out of luck with the beer there. We're still in the process of finalizing all details, so there's no way you can sign up for these concerts quite yet. So in about a week or so, I encourage you to go online to our website at www.orchestraiowa.org for further information as to the dates and times and locations, so you can catch 32 Beethoven piano sonatas. Now, having said that, when I sat down with Ksenia, asking her if she was interested, first of all, she said yes, and then the next thing she said was, oh, there's a problem. Because of all 32 piano sonatas, there's one called the Hammerklavier, which is just deadly, nasty, difficult to play. And she said, you know, it's probably not appropriate for a student to try that. And the professors were busy. Can we get somebody to play that troublesome piece? And so Stuart Goodyear, who is going to be playing our opening concert, the Emperor Piano Concerto, will be returning later on in the season to play that very piece. The Hammerklavier was considered by many to be completely unplayable until Liszt came along, and Liszt proved that yes, it is possible to play that piece with 5 fingers. Now it's still up there in the sort of pantheon of really nasty, hard, difficult things for pianists to torture themselves with. So if there's no other sonata that you're going to listen to, come and hear that one. So once again, in a couple weeks, just go onto our website and there'll be more specific details of how you can attend. So our second Masterworks will be a concert performance of the Messiah in partnership with the Chamber Singers of Iowa City. In fact, Dr. Puterbaugh and I had the same thoughts when we picked up the phone call, when I picked up the phone to ask him to join us. Part of the challenge with this season is that musicians have not been playing with each other. It will have been 520 days since we last performed. And while one can practice at home, the skill of playing in an ensemble, which we used to take for granted and as easy as falling off a log, not so much. We're going to have to relearn some pretty basic things. And so it was really important for us to choose repertoire that was familiar and inviting, also attractive for the ticket office, but also something warm and comfortable for the orchestra to really get into. And Dr. Peterball also had the same idea about his chorus. He was worried that throwing them into the deep end of the pool with something unfamiliar was probably going to be a little bit overwhelming. And so this is the reason why we both came to the same conclusion. You know, why don't we just do the Messiah? Because frankly, I haven't done it in over 12, 13 years. Here's one of our soloists.
Hi, my name is Jessica Frey, and I'm thrilled to be joining Orchestra Iowa as the soprano soloist in Handel's Messiah this November 20th and 21st at the Paramount Theater in Cedar Rapids. After a really long and challenging year away from our family and our friends and of course live music, it is so exciting to come back with something so celebratory, and we really hope you come out and hear it. Please join us. We'll see you there.
In the new year, we have this program that I'm really, really excited about. Hands up, who here knows Jane Walker? She's our principal flautist. She's awesome, she's amazing, she's one of the unsung heroes. Quite frankly, one of the superstars of the orchestra for many years. Never really had an opportunity to feature her as a soloist, even though she's one of our best players. And that's really my fault, because I can't think of a single flute concerto that I like until I found this one. It's a new concerto by American composer Kevin Putz, and it's absolutely fantastic. Before I go on to the next slide where Jane's going to talk about it a bit. It also includes a new work by Ingrid Stolzel. She's a composer who teaches at KU, Kansas University. I knew her very well during my times when I was a resident conductor of the Kansas City Symphony. She's a marvelous person, an incredible composer, and I'm just delighted that I was able to find a place to feature her music because she really is an outstanding talent. When you're putting a program together, for me personally, the first two pieces are the most exciting. And yet, when people look at something that they don't know or don't recognize, they tend to be hesitant. So, Symphony Fantastique, one of the great symphonic accomplishments in all of Western literature, is on this program. Don't get me wrong, I love that piece. I am looking forward to that piece. Audiences will know and love that piece. But I guarantee you, when you go home, you'll be thinking either of Ingrid's piece or this flute concerto.
Hello, I'm Jane Walker, principal flutist with Orchestra Iowa. I'm currently working on a flute concerto by Kevin Putz, which we will be playing for you in March of 2022. I have to tell you, I really love this piece. I think it has everything. It's got beautiful melodies, it's got sections of driving rhythm. I think the orchestration is fantastic. And interplay between the solo part and the instruments of the orchestra is really clever. But mostly I am so excited that we will be back in the Paramount Theater and I will get to play this wonderful music for you with my colleagues on the stage.
In April, we have this program that I have to admit was recycled from last season that we didn't get to play. A couple years ago, you may remember, we were very honored when Emmanuel Axe chose our orchestra to have a week's residency. I mean, I'm still sort of incredulous about that. And once you have literally one of, if not the best pianist in the world perform with you, we were nervous that year that a couple masterworks later we had Joyce Young joining us, and then she played the Paganini variations, the Rachmaninoff Paganini variations. Well, I shouldn't have had any trepidation because she blew the doors off of everybody. It was absolutely spectacular. I only learned later that Rachmaninoff tends to be kind of her party piece, and so I immediately wanted to work with her again to do the Rachmaninoff Third Piano Concerto. Now, for you keyboard pianist nerds out there, Rachmaninoff Third is one of the most difficult works ever written for piano. It is the equivalent of a high-wire tightrope act without a net. There are so many notes per square inch. First of all, it is an absolute Herculean effort for any pianist to play this. From a conductor's point of view, not burdened with actually having to play the notes, I have to tell you the piece still scares the heck out of me. I've done it once before, long before I came to this area. And one of the challenges of this piece is that there's such a whir, W-H-I-R, maybe, of notes that go by. All you hear is brrrr. And so I'm starting and I'm conducting away, and it's only like every 20 measures or so where we come together, and I know if we're together or not. So it's like all these Hail Marys every 20 measures, just like, am I really together with this person? And he or she, whoever happens to be playing that piece, does not have time to look up. It's just one of those pieces. So, in terms of its sheer technical virtuosity and achievement, you must see it and hear it. In its beauty, it's also one of Rachmaninoff's great works. And plus, you can point and laugh at me because secretly I will be stressed out. Here's another clip from Joyce Young. She speaks rather softly, and I can't turn up the volume, so forgive me. It might be too soft. Listen to this.
Hello everyone, it's pianist Joyce Young coming to you from my home in Birmingham. I can't wait to return to Iowa to play one of my favorite pieces. I'll be performing Rachmaninoff's third piano concerto, which I consider the Mount Everest of all piano concertos. It's been a trying year for all of us, and I really look forward to returning to the stage and making live music for you, and I hope you can join us for this celebration. See you soon.
So I love this video clip because she's just so proper and polite. And I have to tell you, I got a chance to know her when she last played with us, and she swears like a sailor. And she is funny and engaging and delightful. In fact, normally we would have a pre-concert sort of reception for her, but with Rachmaninoff Third, she's all business on this piece. She can only relax and party after the concert. This next concert will actually be performed at the Paramount in Cedar Rapids and at Hampshire, and for good reason. We're putting together how would you say this? A collection of choirs throughout the area to sing Beethoven's Ninth. And so it should be quite a spectacular event. However, the piece that is really impressive that I am so excited about is Joel Thompson's Seven Last Words of the Unarmed. He's an African-American composer, and each of these movements feature the last words of Trayvon Martin and Eric Garner and others who died of violence, and set to music. It is one of the most powerful artistic statements that I have come across in many years. The reason why these two pieces are together is that today we tend to enjoy Beethoven's Ninth because of the Ode to Joy. It's a nice tune, it's also a great symphony, but we tend to lose the meaning of it. The poetry is Masonic poetry from the Enlightenment. And the piece really is about democracy, it's about brotherhood, it's about equal protection under the law, and it is about equality. And so here are two pieces that span 250 years or so, talking about the same thing in very different lights. But I have to tell you, come for Beethoven, leave with the Thompson. It's going to be one of the most powerful concerts in recent memory. Then our final concert of the year. From my own programming standpoint, each concert for the orchestra gets steadily more and more difficult. I didn't want to throw the orchestra in at the deep end at the very beginning, but to sort of give them time to recoup our ensemble skills. So by the time we come to our last concert, now we throw in the hardcore stuff, the stuff that's really difficult to play, both individually and in terms of ensemble. We have French composer Taillefer for Overture for Orchestra. She was a remarkable composer of the 1920s. There was a group of composers reacting to the Russians. The Russians had a group called the Mighty Five, which included, Rimsky-Korsakov, Borodin, Balakirov, Rimsky-Korsakov, Borodin, Balakirov, Kui. Thank you, Mussorgsky. Thank you. Yeah. It's been a while since I spoke in public. And in reaction to the Mighty Five, the French came up with the Les Six, the Six. Oh God, I can't remember them either. Millot, Poulenc, Millot, Poulenc, Onager, Taillefer was one of them. I got nothing for you. I failed the exam. I used to know it. Anyhow, then we also have the Korngold Violin Concerto featuring William Haydn, who won the Queen Elizabeth competition with this very piece. Korngold, what I love about this piece is not only is it a great violin concerto, he wrote it and quoted some of his themes from his movies, including Another Dawn from 1937, Juarez from 1939, Anthony Adverse from 1936, and The Prince and the Pauper in 1937. It is where the silver screen meets the concert hall with this piece, and it is absolutely dynamite. And then the second half is our jokesters, of course, Haydn Surprise Symphony. I got this idea talking to the senior college last year, in which I was talking about the music of Haydn. And Haydn always gets a bad rap, because I think Mozart had the better press agent, because there are some really fabulous Haydn symphonies out there. But I thought I'd put on one of the most famous, and of course that's the Surprise Symphony, followed by Strauss's Till Eulenspiegel, a musical journey about a prankster constantly pulling jokes on many of the people in this particular plot. Stay tuned. One thing that makes Orchestra Iowa unique is that we don't just play classical music or just symphonic music or pops. We also are the pit orchestra for the Opera Theater. And this year's opera in January will be Così fan tutte. We also perform ballet, as you know, with the Nutcracker, which is always, I'll be very curious. The orchestra don't tend to like to play the Nutcracker. And they don't like to play the Nutcracker because it's really, really hard. And yet it's expected every year. And it's not only hard, but it's written in such a way that you can practice it and practice it and practice it and have it down. But after 3 weeks or so, it's completely forgotten because it's in awkward keys. There's no muscle memory. So every year, it's like doing calisthenics. So you usually have a very grumbly and unhappy orchestra as they trip into the pit. We have our chamber series, again, that's repeated both in Iowa City and here. I won't bore you with the details of each of these programs, but to say one of the things I love about our orchestra and our chamber series is that it allows our musicians to shine and allows them to do some of the programming. And with chamber music, a little bit more so than symphonic music, you have a much more varied sound palette, color palette. Whether it's, let's just look at this program. You have Beethoven Sextet for winds, or you have horn duets, or a piano quartet. You can just mix things up stylistically and also in terms of instrumentation. For example, Three's a Crowd, horn, trumpet, and trombone, or flute, cello, and piano, or Brahms clarinet trio, that sort of thing. It also stretches their abilities and lets them shine in a more soloistic capacity, and it also gives me the night off, which I'm very happy about. Pops. So I was in grade 10 when this movie came out. I had my first kiss on a date watching this movie. And so right before Halloween, October 30th, we've gotten in the habit of playing film scores to the live music to the film. So we're not just playing music from Ghostbusters, we're actually showing the movie Ghostbusters, complete with dialogue and everything. They've just stripped out all the music and the orchestra is playing it in real time. And so it's kind of fun to do that sort of thing. We've done that recently with The Wizard of Oz, which was great. Casablanca, which is outstanding. We did that about 3 or 4 years ago. A funny story about that. because when I'm studying this music, I can't be interpretive about it. I have to make sure that the music follows a very quick pace, because I'm actually literally following a clock that's right next to a screen of the film. And so I knew Casablanca like the back of my hand, because I had to watch it about 40 or 50 different times. And here's the great thing about good movies: you don't get sick of them. And I remember in concert always kind of like quietly tapping myself, say, hey, don't get caught up into the movie, because I'm going to be having to start the orchestra in about a minute or so. So it was really interesting that you would think I would have gotten really sick of some of these movies, but usually the quality of the movie plus the quality of the music makes for a great experience. So for our holiday spectacular, we have Amy Stoner, who is a local singer who will be joining us as a headliner.
Hi everyone, my name is Amy Stoner, and I'm so excited to be singing with Orchestra Iowa in their 2020 Holiday Spectacular. I've worked with Maestro Tim Hankewich and Orchestra Iowa in the past, singing in follies, holidays, and music band and concert, and I can't wait to be back at the beautiful Paramount Theater this holiday season, seeing your smiling faces live and in person.
One thing that I was really disappointed with last year is we came this close to actually being able to perform a concert. And I designed a holiday concert for brass and organ that was also going to be televised. And we had to cancel it in mid to late November after COVID really started spiking. And I decided, why let the foundation, the groundwork, go to waste. And so we're going to try it again this year, and this should be hopefully performed both here in Iowa City and also in Cedar Rapids. Then of course we're also doing musical moments from all the great John Williams scores. I have to say that there's good reason why John Williams is one of the most famous composers, American composers who's currently living, because he's just written hit after hit after hit after hit. And when you compare his music with some of his colleagues and contemporaries who are writing film music, there's just no comparison. Just the craftsmanship, the virtuosity that's required, just the technical skill. He kind of represents the last generation of the real greats. He learned his craft by studying the music of Korngold and Strauss, and so he's using the same techniques in his own movie scores, which is just really a joy to perform. And then finally, we're also performing the music of Queen. It's not just the orchestra playing arrangements of the great hits of Queen. We actually have a cover band doing all the great numbers of Queen, including like We Will Rock You and We Are the Champions and Fat Bottom Girls, which is my favorite, and all the other great ones of Queen. So here's another message from Peter Brennan, who actually puts these programs together. He's also a bit soft-spoken, so forgive me if it's a little on the faint side, but I do have the volume turned all the way up.
Hi, Cedar Rapids. Peter Brennan here from Symphony Fantastique. Just wanting to let you know how happy we are to be coming back to you in May of 2022 and bringing you our Queen show. It's going to be wonderful to work with all of you again at Orchestra Iowa, and especially Maestro Tim.
And that is all she wrote.
That's all, folks.
So, I am extremely excited that this looks like progress, in that we're hoping that this is going to be as normal a season as possible under the circumstances. But I have to tell you, I'm still kind of scared for a variety of reasons. One is, what does the future of the Delta variant mean for our future concerts? And on a more sort of neurotic and deep-seated insecurity, I'm also wondering, after 520 days, can we still do this? The musicians having not played, I haven't waved my hands and sort of screamed at them for a good 520 days. So it'll be really really interesting. So before I go into last year at all, I think it would be best if I could convince you to ask questions about either this season or last season to sort of inspire a bit of a give and take of what's between you and me. So any questions that you may have? Yes, me.
How did the orchestra do financially through last year?
Great. Question is, how did the orchestra do financially last year? You are going to hear me say something very unusual on a fairly regular basis this year, and that is, thank you, federal government. I can tell you, I think we would have gone out of business if it weren't for help from the federal government. We were able to, we got something called a PPP loan, a payment protection program, that allowed us to pay our musicians at the end of 2 seasons ago, the season that was interrupted. We were able to pay them through the end of the season, even though basically February, March, and April and May were canceled. And that also gave us a little seed money to help pay our staff, all of whom, including myself, were put on 50% furlough. And then we also qualified for an additional PPP loan when it came out, as well as we were also qualified for something called I'm just trying to search the words for what it was called, a Shuttered venue grant. And initially there was confusion about these 2 pots of money. One, it started off that you could apply for one or the other and not both. And if you applied for one and were denied, you could not get the other. One was more substantial than the other. And so arts organizations, including arts organizations like Hankewich, and others, we were caught in a catch-22. Do we try for a second round of PPP, which is less, and we might get turned down because we already had one, or we go for Shuttered venue? And luckily, enough people complained to our state representatives who got on the dime and solved it so that we could apply for PPP, we could apply for both. And if we got PPP, it would be subtracted from the amount from the Shuttered venue grant. And so I'm happy to say we got both, and we did very well, which means we have an operating surplus. Because when you have income coming in and no production going out, money accumulates. So the irony is not lost on us that our balance sheet has never looked so good. Now, having said this, you do need a lot of money in the bank. Orchestras are a lot like restaurants. Today's ticket sales pay for yesterday's bills. Brucemore, for example, that is a very sizable and expensive program. Not just the orchestra, which is incredibly expensive, which is just the musician cost alone is around $40,000. When you do an outdoor program where you have to build a stage, you have to put on the lights, you have to put in generators, you have to buy porta potties, you have to have, I'm just scratching the surface of the stuff. That is already a program that is approaching 6 figures, if not well exceeding it. And a lot of those vendors want their money up front. And so a lot of these programs we will be having to pay overhead before ticket revenue ever comes in. So our balance sheet is deceptive in how good it looks right now, because a lot of that will be drawn down very quickly in the first half of this year. And ticketing revenue won't really be recognized until January or so. And so I really don't know what our financial picture is going to look like until about February or March, just because of that sort of circulatory system of cash flow of money going out, money coming in. But I'm very confident we are in a good financial position that we can start our season with our concerts and not have to worry about going in debt before a note is even played. So that's the good news. Other questions? Yes?
My
know,
Say the question.
oh, thank you. She was just wondering what sort of damage Orchestra Iowa incurred during the derecho a year ago, and how we've pulled out of it, and what's the status there. I sometimes think God likes to kick somebody when they're down. We were worried about last season, not sure what was going to happen, and then all of a sudden the derecho came through. And I know some people and some organizations were damaged more than others. So Orchestra Iowa, our office buildings, we lost our roof essentially. It was extremely damaged, and as it didn't fly off, but it was doing this during the derecho. And when it was doing this, there were a bunch of pipes and sprinkler systems attached to the roof. And so as the roof was doing this, the sprinkler system blew up. And it started leaking water from the third floor to the first floor. And sadly, right under the burst pipe on the third floor was our library. That is the single most valuable asset Orchestra Iowa has, and a third of it was destroyed. Now, we spent the entire year replacing it. We went to the pains of drying out as much music as possible. We triaged what was salvageable and what wasn't. For example, there were some very valuable things that we had. A lot of Russian music, for example, Prokofiev and Shostakovich. In the early 90s, no, let me back up. During the Cold War, Russia, or the Soviet Union, and North America, we did not recognize each other's copyright. And so orchestras were buying this music and playing it without paying royalties or licensing fees or anything, just because. And in the 90s, something called the GATT Treaty was signed, which allowed people, which basically said that if you already own this music, you can play it whenever you want. But if you don't own it already, you now have to rent it, and you have to pay just royalties, rental fees, and licensing fees, making it really, really expensive. And so we had all this irreplaceable Soviet music like Shostakovich and Prokofiev that we owned, and that we were able to salvage by scanning it. And we have to we wrap them in plastic because we have to keep the originals on site in case anybody comes and says, let me see your originals, to make sure that you're not just stealing this music. And so we spent a lot of time reconstructing our library. At the same time, we also had a fundraiser, Save Our Scores, where we outlined all the scores that were damaged and needed replacing. And I have to tell you, we were just absolutely astonished how the community stepped forward and bought all these scores back for us. That was amazing. And so all this music, our library is almost complete. Now, for those of you who have been following me on the Frank Sinatra series, I'm broadcasting that from Opus Concert Cafe, which is on the first floor underneath where all this water was coming. For the longest time, those panels behind me were completely destroyed, and we had to replace them all. And literally 2 weeks ago, our roof was completed. Our Opus Concert Cafe was fully restored. Our library in the next 3 weeks is going to be returned to its original place with almost all the music replaced. So it's taken over a year for us to completely recover from the derecho. But having said that, the Paramount was unscathed. So we were lucky that we didn't lose our concert hall. Any other questions? Yes?
In obtaining all the music that you need to for a season, is somebody in your organization or you having to make just numerous contacts to get the music and go through all of the licensing requirements and that kind of thing? What's the mechanics of that?
Okay, what's the mechanics of getting the music? And it is a very complicated and mercurial and foggy dance. Part of it's budgetary. For example, when we do Beethoven, it does not cost us a thing. Beethoven's been dead for a long enough time that we don't have to rent it. So stuff like Brahms, Beethoven, Mozart, we own. It doesn't cost us a dime. Therefore, it's quite cost friendly for us to do classics like that. Now, some people would say, well, that's all very well and good, but I like new music because, you know, that old stuff, as nice as it is, bores me. I want something new. And that's where you run into trouble. Because that's when you can't buy the music, you have to rent it. And if you do more than one performance of it, or if you broadcast it, you have to pay licensing fees on top of that. And if, let's say, if it's a ballet or a theatrical production, then you have to pay grand rights all over top of that. Several years ago, we did the ballet Cinderella, Prokofiev, one of my all-time favorite pieces. The grand rights for that, just to allow us to play the music in a theatrical representation of that music in a ballet, cost us $20,000 without us paying a single note. So, as much as I like new music, anything that's older than composed past 1925 is usually a rental and highly expensive. And when it comes to new music, I get unsolicited scores all the time. I sometimes get word of mouth. I'm talking to friends of mine, musicians and other conductors who said, hey, Tim, we just did this piece last week. You gotta check this out. We loved it. And so what usually happens is I get all these recommendations, and when I have a little time, I actually listen to them. Sometimes they're online on YouTube. Sometimes they're on a composer's private website. Sometimes it's on a publisher's website, and I can hear snippets of it. And it's not rocket science when I decide to do something. If I like the piece, that means if I want to listen to it more than once, that means I might like it. And so it goes into the other pile. If I hear something that after like 30 seconds I go, I just don't like that, I'm not going to program it. Because as an audience member, you only have one shot at that piece. I have the benefit of months and months of studying and 4 or so rehearsals to really get into the piece, to make it work. As an audience member, you only get one chance to understand the piece. So I want to make sure that I like it. Because if I like it, I think you're going to like it. And if you don't like it, I can explain to you why I like it. And that is the secret to new music. Because there's like anything else, when Beethoven was alive, a lot of the music that was being composed back then was garbage. And over time, the cream rises to the top. And it's the same today. There's a lot of junk out there. But every once in a while, you come across a gem, like this Joel Thompson 7 Last Words of the Unarmed that we're performing with Beethoven 9. That is a masterwork of our time. I am convinced of it. It's absolutely fabulous. So when I'm putting a program together, I'm looking at its cost. I'm looking at its duration. I'm looking at its instrumentation. For example, if I'm doing a small classical piece, a program that requires a small orchestra, I'm not going to program something big on that same program. It too has to fit the instrumentation that's been budgeted for that particular program. And then I also see if there's any thematic or programmatic interconnections between the piece, the pieces on the program, to hopefully come up with something unique. The interesting thing about programming, it's like being a chef where you put like honey and garlic together. Two things that shouldn't complement each other, but in fact they do. I always fall into the trap that sometimes you come up with a great program, or a theme, I should say. Like, wouldn't it be great if you just did music about boats, or music about summer, or music about Lord knows what, rivers or something. And you can get so in love with the theme that you end up with music that doesn't go together very well. And then you come up with a program like Brahms' Symphony No. 1 and Rachmaninoff Third Piano Concerto, both of which have nothing to do with each other, but stylistically, it's just like chocolate and coffee. And that just drives my marketing team crazy when they say, Tim, tell me, what's the program? What puts these two pieces together? And I say, chocolate and coffee. So that's the weird thing about programming. you can come up with programs that look great on paper, but they might not actually work in actual production. So that's a very long and circuitous thing around about how and where and why you get our music. Any other questions? I gotta say, this last year was extraordinarily difficult. I think a lot of people are surprised when they find that our orchestra is not comprised of hobbyists and weekend warriors who have day jobs and just like want to blow off steam to play a little bit of Beethoven. In fact, that they're all professionals that have dedicated their life and their skills to play this kind of music, because it's hard. A little bit of high school isn't going to get you anywhere near this orchestra because it's just too difficult and demanding a discipline to play this music. And the sad reality is that for many of these musicians, if they're not playing, they're not earning. Which is why so many of our musicians play in multiple orchestras, why they teach on the side, why they play weddings and bar mitzvahs and what have you, and in case they need extra income, they will get a side hustle and work at Target or wherever else. But that's not their day job, that is their side hustle. Music is their day job. Now the reason I'm saying this is that this pandemic could not have been more aggressively targeted to the gig economy of which these people belong. And so I know there are many musicians who did not get assistance at all and had to claw and scrape, and it was a very it was a very impotent feeling seeing that we couldn't help them without giving them work. And we had no idea if we were going to get Triple P or Shuttered venue grant assistance. And only that picture became clear by the summertime, by maybe May, by the time our traditional season was already over. And so to look musicians in the eye who are literally starving this year has been pretty hard. And so I am extraordinarily excited to come back, not only to make great music and share joy and create wonderful performances, but to give my musicians purpose again and to help them pay the rent. It's really that simple. So I must have been brilliant again. I'm on a roll. So I want to thank you for joining me and thank you for listening to me drone on. And I hope to see you at some of these concerts. And if I do, please say hello and remind me who you are, because I'm probably going to see you like this. So I look forward to this season playing music for you. Thank you.